supply, demand, and regulation. Some of those might seem obvious. What are we doing to encourage demand? For example, we're going out and we're spreading the word, making sure people do know about commercial space so that people like Jeff and his organizations can become a customer for these things. Things like supply, going through the actual commercial orbital transportation services activity, those Space Act Agreement types of activities help generate a supply of those capabilities. Now and regulation for the FAA particularly, obviously, we can help lower the barriers there by only regulating to the extent necessary, being a one-stop shop, so that a commercial space transportation operator can come to our office and we can take care of the payload review and all the other types of interfaces with the other types of other government agencies. But then also, the one that's kind of fuzzy all the time is how are we lowering the barrier to investment? And we don't want to do anything that's going to get us thrown in jail or cause any ethical kind of considerations, but that's an important aspect to the whole financial model. And so actually, just by showing up at some of the meetings, and whether we have a talking role or not, just by showing up gives credibility to this idea that 5 years ago people thought were wacky, and an idea that today a lot of people doesn't even know exists. So the government is doing a lot of things to help lower those barriers.
One point I want to bring out there though is as great as AST is in terms of promoting the commercial side, I think they're being put in a very awkward place when you have to be cheerleader and regulator. I think when you have a situation where the same organization their mission is to promote a particular industry and have to regulate it, it's going to be difficult. We don't want the FDA promoting the use of drugs that they're responsible for regulating. We didn't like it when the EPA was promoting the use of fossil fuels when its job was to regulate the Clean Air Act. So I think we're putting the FAA in a potentially very awkward situation as the market begins to mature.
And Chan, let me hit that one time, because this is always the first. I started at the Office of Commercial Space Transportation about 9 months ago, just like when Frank was starting at Orbital. And the first thing that hit me was safety versus promotion. How can we rectify this dichotomy? And to me, it's the wrong question. If you can define how safe is safe, then there's not a problem. We'll just promote up to that line. And if you can't define specifically where that boundary is, then there's going to be a give and take. And so we need to be able to give and take with safety in mind. Everything we do is has safety in mind, because safety is in the interest of industry as well as in the interest of the government as well as in the interest of the public. So you have to just make sure that you're talking to the right question, and safety v. promotion is not there. I should mention we have Chuck Larson in the audience. He's got his hand up, but I think we should we'll let Patty talk first, and then we'll let Chuck talk.
But
you are color coordinated, both of you.
We had...
Chan, I'm Patty Smith, and in the 11 years that I served in the capacity of the Associate Administrator of the office, I can honestly tell you that no one was more concerned about the safety of this industry than the industry itself. Reason being, there's so much at stake. There's so much in the way of uncertainty. For example, when an accident takes place, and at some point there will be an accident, will it mean for the commercial sector that they will have to stand down the way that the shuttle does for sometimes in the past years on end? Because if it does, it's not likely that that industry sector will ever survive. They don't have the muscle, the wherewithal, the resources to sustain that kind of stand down. In terms of the compatibility of the roles, the very first hearing that I had in this position, Congressman Weldon asked me that question because the rest of the agency, the FAA, had their promotion role taken away. He said, what about the promotion and regulation of commercial space? Don't you feel that in conflict? And I said, no, because it is how you draw the bright line. This is an industry, because it's still evolving, that very, very much needs promotion from wherever it comes from. We don't have the capacity to do one and the same as other launching states that we compete with that are owned, operated, regulated by their governments. So it's all the same thing. They are also fully supported and subsidized by their governments. The commercial industry is not. The closest thing that anyone could ever say comes anywhere near that, and it's not an automatic, is indemnification, which is a recommendation. And I always worried in the position that, heaven forbid, we had a Katrina and some other national disaster on the same day that we had a launch accident. Where would commercial space indemnification be in that queue? What kind of hard choice would an emergency appropriation look like for commercial space on that day if we were looking at helping, rightfully so, the survivors of a Katrina accident? So my point to you is, yes, on the appearance it may seem odd, but as long as the regulated industry knows that you don't compromise when it comes to safety, that when compliance monitors go out to the launches, they are there for the express purpose of ensuring that the licensee is operated in compliance with the license conditions, there's no conflict.
And I think that's actually going to, oh, you want to make a comment real quick? We're a little over time.
Safety is promotion to us, and safety does come first, as Patty says. Also, Mike Sneed was going to comment even before Patty's comments. We do have crew regulations. They were published a couple of years ago. A lot of people just think NASA does human spaceflight. All we need are applicants to come. We do reusable launch vehicles and reentry vehicles. We have regulations for that. So they're there, they're in place. NASA knows it. That's why we engage them with the COTS program and why we do the licensing for that and for the ISS CRS.
Mike, you got a question?
One quick last one.
Hi, my name is Mike Snyder. Ironically, the question I had dovetails very well into this, and it was something that you said, Ken, about indemnification. Obviously, insurance and such, that would go along with operating any kind of commercial vehicle, and the potential loss of that vehicle can be a cost barrier, and you mentioned it when you were up there talking. And I was just wondering if you could, or whoever the appropriate person was, to talk maybe a little bit more about what's being done with that, and maybe if Jeff or Chan had any thoughts on what is being done on in the actual Congress side of it, if there was anything.
From the FAA perspective, I would say, Mike, start walking the microphone back to Chuck, and while you're doing that, I'll say that the question of indemnification and whether it should be continued gets revisited every single time there's an authorization bill. Chuck, why don't you fill in some blanks there?
Yeah, I guess it sunsets at the end of this year. So we're looking at, the industry is, of course, very much aware of that. As Patty's has been intimated, we can't lobby Congress, but we're very interested in promoting our industry. And at the ComStack meetings, which have been mentioned that we have twice a year, that question comes up. There's been reports back to Congress on that. And those are things that we think are very important to promote our industry and keep it viable on an international basis. And that's part of our charter, is we want not just to have a safe, but an economically viable and competitive commercial space transportation industry here. So our office is always looking out for that. And I guess I didn't introduce myself the last time. Chuck Larson, Office of Commercial Space Transportation at the FAA.
Chuck's the guy that is attending all those COTS meetings and reviews and things like that for us. Do you guys want to say anything about that?
Well, I'll just say, indemnification is always a sticky issue. It's one of those areas where we sort of end up looking at things from almost a partisan way. It's one of the few areas where we get, because there are certain philosophical issues involved in how far do you go with subsidy, government subsidy, private risk. We have generally come down on the side of agreeing on some level of indemnification, cross-waiver of liability, and so on. But it's a discussion we have to have every year, and I don't know where it'll go this year.
Well, with that, I'd like to go ahead and close our panel. Please join me in thanking our panelists today. Klaus, you gonna Okay.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for the panel.